Now, not so much moving on and staying in the realm of environmental activism, let me introduce you to our guest for this week. Polly Higgins is the leading voice behind Ecocide Law, ecocide being crimes against the earth, including people, animals, and what we consider to be inanimate objects like forests, lakes, mountains, etc. As she writes on her website, simply put, destroying the earth is a crime, as is state failure to assist those who are faced with displacement due to climate change. Higgins used to be a practicing barrister, aka lawyer, in London and now advocates for this missing law. We spoke with her last week about her work, the parameters of ecocide, and how international change comes from the singular principle of do no harm. Take a look.
I've proposed into the United Nations that we criminalize mass damage and destruction, in essence. I've given legal definition to that. In essence, if you ask the questions, why is it that we're still continuing with fossil fuels, even though we know the evidence is there, this is causing significant harm? The answer is because it's not a crime. So there's missing law here. And it's really about filling that gap and recognizing that what it comes down to is creating an overriding superior law that it puts in place a legal duty of care. And there's a hierarchy of law, if you like. And at the very top, if you imagine like a triangle, at the very top of all law sits international criminal law. So genocide, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression, all these laws supersede every other law that we have. It's about addressing missing state crime and corporate crime. And those who make the decisions at the very top end, they're the ones that this is specifically targeted to. Those who are carrying out orders below can also be prosecuted, but it tends to be prosecutions look for those who are the ones who lead in taking action or failing to take action where there's a criminality. It's about using the International Criminal Court that sits in The Hague. So what we already have there, the ICC was put in place back in 1998. They already take the cases for international crimes of genocide, war crimes, crimes of aggression, and crimes against humanity. So it's expanding their remit. The governing document that puts the ICC in place is called the Rome Statute. So it's just an amendment to that document that's required. Now, how it works is there are 123 countries that are signatories to the Rome Statute. So not all countries in the world are signatories. All of those that are signatories are bound by that statute. So with ecocide being added to it, an amendment to it, then they're all bound by it. It doesn't mean they all have to sign up to it. In fact, all it needs is a 2/3 majority, which is 83 people actually in the world, to sign off on this, and then it's binding on all of those 122 states. Now, what about those other states that aren't signatories? America's not a signatory. What happens there? Well, what happens is it marginalizes America's activities. If America wants to continue on with its ecocides, a lot of its transnational corporations will discover very quickly that the safest place to do that will probably be just back at home, because as soon as they step out of the country into a state that is a signatory state, they can be prosecuted. So either you actually shift and move with the new rules of the game, or you become a marginalized country. Now, given that America is a global player, and this is all about financial investment, to continue with the financial investment, you'll find that actually you'll want to change your business activities to ensure that you remain a global player. So although I don't think America will be a leader in this, they will be a follower. But what is very interesting is that once this gets tabled, actually everything starts shifting then. It doesn't wait until the law is finally in place, because you'll find that the flow of investment moves far faster. If you are some Wall Street investor or fund manager, for instance, and suddenly you see that this law is looming, you know what? Investment in fossil fuels suddenly becomes a really dangerous industrial activity. You're going to lose a lot of money out of something that's going to be a criminal activity in 5 years' time or how many years' time. And so you suddenly start pooling your money, and suddenly the really safe investment becomes, for instance, instead of fossil fuel, renewables.
So on that same note, you have several books, but you have a good book called Earth is Our Business. And I'm wondering how you feel, because Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, says that capitalism is the problem. It's not so much climate change as capitalism that has caused climate change, that perpetuates climate change. How do you feel, in terms of what you just spoke about, that investment can push this sort of change? How do you feel that capitalism and environmental safety could coincide, or do you?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with Naomi Klein. I just go one step deeper than that. What's created capitalism? Law. What are the rules of the game? What are the rules of the game of capitalism as we know it? Well, it is the law for a CEO and his directors to put the interests of the shareholder first, which is to maximize profit. So you have a huge problem here. It's a cognitive dissonance. To sit there in a boardroom and actually say, hey, I really don't like this. This is going to cause a lot of harm, and people are going to be displaced, and the land's going to be destroyed, and the water is going to be polluted. Well, the lawyer at the table, which could be me, would say, tough. It's a crime. It's not a crime. And just remember, your number one legal duty is the interest of the shareholders about maximizing profit. So don't get too ethical on this one. So we have a problem. Our law is out of step with our understanding of what is going on. And our laws that govern capitalism is at a breaking point, if you like. And so this is about how laws become hugely out of kilter. The scales of justice are out of kilter, if you like, and how Ecocide Law readdresses that, because Ecocide Law is about criminal law. It's about making it a crime so that individuals are held to account for their decisions, those human beings in those companies, not the company. It's not saying this is the criminal, because that's just a piece of paper. It's saying that, and this is the principle that was put in place during the Nuremberg War Tribunals, it's human beings who commit crimes. And that's hugely, hugely important.
So I'm curious, what is your opinion on, because there was a recent article that excuse me, that just came out discussing how India had a huge solar panel project planned that was knocked down because of trade tribunals. And the TPP, for example, or TTIP or things like that, would create these sovereign tribunals that are outside any government. How
Yeah.
would that affect an ecocide law?
Yeah, so again, this is about the hierarchy of law. Where does that sit within that framework? You've got international criminal law at the top, bilateral treaties, multilateral treaties, transatlantic trade partnerships. They all come below. Yeah, so they're overridden by international criminal law, and that's hugely, hugely important, because what Ecocide Law does is it renders TTIP toothless. And that's very, very important. And not just TTIP or any other transatlantic treaty that's being put in place at the moment, or bilateral treaties that are used often with these small island developing states in America, for instance. It overrides all of that, and that's recognized in law as being what's called the conflict of laws. What takes superior hierarchy in the hierarchy of law?
I think sometimes people hear about, like the hierarchy of law, like international law, that seems so big, it seems so far beyond me and what I can do. And I know that that you have a book that talks about this as well, your personal evolution and how that is necessary to provide this national evolution or this international evolution. Talk a little bit about how that, even when with you, who's somebody who deals with this international law and these big ideas, how can somebody on a very localized level start shifting those paradigms and shifting their own evolution?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because this is in part my journey as well. Once you start looking at big international law to turn around kind of a sinking ship, and you realize that, there's ecocide happening all over the frigging place. In every country, everywhere I go, I'm thinking, okay, what's the ecocide here? And lo and behold, I discover it. And I began to think, well, what about our inner ecocides? What are those patterns of harm that play out in our lives that we repeat and we repeat that actually, cause harm to us at a kind of mental and, dare I say it, spiritual level, and that, have their own collateral damage that actually creates disharmony within, my relationship, within my community. And it made me realize that actually, global governance and self-governance, they run on the same lines. And it's that whole thing of actually understanding where our own boundaries are so that we don't remain complicit within a system of harm, both internally as well as externally.
Right. And like you said, when you start to understand that you're not going to take it, so to speak, on an internal level, that automatically goes outward, and you start noticing it about everything from the air to the water to, social justice and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And you know what? It's really not rocket science. It's only lawyers who make law complicated. In truth, it's not. You can ask yourself a few key fundamental questions. Whose interests are being protected here by any given law? And, is it polluter or is it people and planet? And, if it's the polluter, the destroyer, the big transnational corporation that's causing harm, there's something wrong there. That can't be right, ultimately, at the end of the day. And by the way, this is the other thing. Law doesn't have to take lots of time to put in place. Every country in the world can pass emergency legislation overnight. So, it doesn't have to go through long, convoluted processes. George Bush, he shored up Wall Street at 3 o'clock in the morning. We passed terrorist legislation at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not that that was our best laws, but, but this is the thing. Emergency, when we do decide this is a climate emergency, then we can put in place emergency laws. And an emergency is just a state of emergence. It's an opportunity for something new to emerge. It's not something to be scared of. It's something to welcome in, actually. So, I say welcome in the emergency. Normal rules don't apply then.
To learn more about Polly, visit pollyhiggins.com.